everybody. Good morning. Good morning and welcome. Thank you all so much for joining us this morning in a very sunny and beautiful Meath. Meath is really putting on a show this morning, isn't she? It's so great to be here. I don't know when was the last time we had a wheel event in Meath. Any other wheelies around, remember? Oh, right, that's okay. My name is Sharon Hughes and I am the Leadership Academy Manager, and thank you so much for coming this morning. So this is... That's fun. So this is what we call the breakfast clubs, and they are the leadership event series of the Leadership Academy, which is brought to you by the Wheel, which is Ireland's Association for Community, Voluntary, Social Enterprise and Charitable Enterprises. So the Academy is a place for leaders at any and all stages of their leadership journeys to take the next step on their leadership journey, whatever that is and whatever that looks like to them. The event is being recorded, please note, and if you do put pictures on LinkedIn, and please do, I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, make sure and tag us please, we would love that and we can connect back with you. And we would just like to thank the lovely hosts at Claremont. It's such a lovely venue, I didn't even know it's a venue, but it's one of our members, and you may have seen that they actually won a load of awards outside, so thanks so much to them for hosting us. So this morning's event is about leadership and allyship. So in modern language, we refer to ally as a person who supports another marginalised group within society. And as a sector, I think we probably understand this premise more than most in a lot of ways. But what does allyship mean to us in our own personal leadership journeys, and how are we showing up as allies in society? So making it to the top is brilliant, but who are we bringing with us as leaders in the sector? And what are we doing to make sure that everyone has access to opportunities and that the playing field is equal? So this morning we are joined by two, when I say incredible speakers, I think they're all my favourite, but these two are definitely my favourite. So And we've had conversations offline, and I will read out their full bios, and you'll have to bear with me, but I always think in our sector that people they're very coy about telling you some of the amazing things that they've done, so let me do it for them here this morning. So Adele McSorley, that's this lady, as opposed to Guillaume. So Adele is the Operations Director at Mr Price Branded Bargains and is responsible for their diversity and inclusion strategy, which includes a commitment to increase employability rates of people with disabilities. And they've developed partnerships with the National Learning Network, the Rehab Group, As I Am and Peter McFerry, as well as other marginalised groups such as people who have exited prison and members of the travelling community. That's proper DEI, by the way. She has collected the People's Choice Award at the Charity Excellence Awards 2022, Talent Acquisition Strategy Award at the Irish HR Champion Awards, and Advancing Disability Equality Award at the National Diversity and Inclusion Awards 2023. And most importantly, she's from Meath. We all know. She was like home turf. So we were like, well, yeah, just the way we want it. So yeah, and then this is even funnier because Guillaume works at me and he sent me his bio and I was like, you did what? So let me tell you guys what Guillaume has done. So Guillaume Jacquinot is the Campaigns and Advocacy Manager for the Wheel. He's worked in the disability sector since 2012 with various organisations at both national and international levels. He was elected Secretary General of Inclusion Europe, a European organisation which represents people with intellectual disabilities and their families at an EU level. He holds a Master's in Human Rights and completed an LLM in International and Comparative Disability Law and Policy in NUIG. Since 2022, he has created and continuously presented a seminar on disability rights to raise awareness among university students specialising in human rights and support for vulnerable groups. So they are our two speakers today. Yeah, they're great, aren't they? So we just go home now. That was it. So you've heard enough from me now. So when I first started in the Leadership Academy, which is about 2.5 years ago, DEI it's foremost to what we do. We want to make sure that there are leadership pathways for everybody, not just for one group of society. So I was kind of poking around, who's good at DEI? Mr Price kept coming up, right? Now if that's not a slight disconnect, and this lady's name just kept coming up, everyone was like, have you heard about Mr Price's DEI? So eventually we actually had to connect. So Adele, could you begin by introducing yourself and your own background and how you ended up where you are currently, please?
All right, okay. So I'm Adele McSorley. I'm from Skryne originally, living in Navan now. I am Operations Director with Mr Price, as you know. I started my career as a Montessori teacher, so how left of field could we possibly get? However, I some days I'm Montessori teacher to 1,800 employees. We can have those days. Got into retail by chance, loved retail, loved business, started studying part-time, which I only think I finished 2 years ago, and I just don't have the time to re-engage. Went from retail to wholesale and back into then Mr. Price, and came into Mr. Price as a buyer with a startup where you put your shoulder to the wheel. So there was 3 head office staff at the time. We had 8 stores, and they were in chaos. So it was literally shoulder to the wheel, get onto the shop floor and start things from scratch. So I moved from buying into operations. It wasn't by choice. It was something the owner wanted. I didn't think I could do. And he was very supportive and gave me a coach. So I had a coach for about 5 years. And from that, I suppose, we just started to delve into, because it was a financial crisis and things were quite scary, and we didn't know what we were doing opening a business in a financial crisis, particularly a retail business. So we wanted to give back, but in a sustainable way, and also bearing in mind that we're a startup, so we've no money. Like, we're literally ringing suppliers on every week to say, can we pay you late this week to pay our staff? So people first was always the approach. So we wanted to give back, but we didn't have money to give to charities. That just wasn't there, because we just needed to survive. So we said we would start to create meaningful career paths. So I got a lot of steps up in my career, a lot of really good people who helped me up. And we've a really established team who can help other people. So we said, how about we use our skills and we pay it forward? So it started with a transition year programme, and National Learning Network came to us and said, we have incredible adults who are on retail programmes, and literally they cannot get businesses just to give them an opportunity to get started, which sounded really, really bizarre to me. So we took in our first employee, who is still with us 14 years later and thriving. And that employee did a 6-month work experience and went from not being able to speak to having just 6 words really, and being terrified of people, to being fully verbal, driving, living independently. And on my last visit to the store, I always look at her and I know it's her, but she's transformed so much I almost don't recognise her. Coming up to me to say, did you travel today? Did you stay last night? How are you? What can I do for you? I'm here to help you if you need anything. So from that, once it came to the 6th month, the end of the 6th month, and I knew I had to speak to the store manager and say to him, we're actually going to keep this lady. And how do you have that conversation? But the relationship was so strong and built up so well that he made the call to me before I had to make it to him. So we just grew from that, and it was like a little bit like digging a little deeper. Who else is out there that needs a chance? That's kind of...
Yeah, not what is expected, I bet. But yeah, it's such a great story, isn't it? Yeah, it gets better. Guillaume, no pressure. So could you introduce yourself to the room, please, and tell us a bit about how you ended up in this space?
Well, I might start with the obvious. I'm not from Navan.
Or me.
Yeah, me. Not all of that. I'm actually coming from a city called Cholet, from France, in Brittany. And actually, one of my colleagues, surprisingly, is from the exact same city, which was... So yeah, I studied in Cholet as student. I studied law for a couple of years, and due to my background and my family, like I'll get back to that later. I have a disabled sister, so like for me, disability was really important from the get-go, looking at the struggles of disabled people and their families. So I studied human rights, and then I realized, studying that's a lot of the time, disability and these kind of topics were not raised at all at university. There was barely any work done on this, like a lot of invisible people, invisible stories. So I just decided to research on that and then start my career path. Like I wanted to become a lawyer, but like I decided to change like for this because there was so much work like to be done. So I started to work in Paris for an organization representing France at the European level for disability questions. Then after I worked at the international level with Handicap International on humanitarian aid and see like the action of humanitarian actions globally. And then I've been told, oh, you know what, there's a great LLM in Galway, on disability studies. You should go there. I was like, that's great, but my English is really bad, so how do I do that? So I basically took 6 months just to work on my English and, kind of break the language barrier. And here I am in Galway in 2015, doing the LLM, trying to do my best to, just send this 20,000 words essay with my broken English, but anyway, I made it. The thing after is I went to Austria to work for an EU agency on fundamental rights, where I worked on disability issues, but also there was loads of intersectional issues, get back to this, but on all the people, LGBT community with a disability. So that's why I started to touch upon intersectionality through the lens of disability. Then I worked a couple of years in Brussels for Inclusion Europe, so kind of lobbying at the EU level to make sure that Europe and the countries were more accessible. All the topics around independent living, employment, education were more implemented. Then studied for had a break in 2020. Just decided, and it was perfect timing to travel around the world. And then, I think it was in Brazil or India, I've heard about this thing called COVID. I said, yeah, we'll see. And yeah, I saw, just went back from great freedom to my parents' house for a couple of months, but went back to Ireland after that just to be with my wife, who I met in Galway in 2015. Worked a couple of years for Inclusion Ireland, which is the national organization for people with intellectual disabilities and their families. And then working at Inclusion Ireland, I started to realize the number of organizations working in Ireland for common good. And I looked at the will and the work that is done to coordinate all the actions, all the projects, this being an example of sharing, fights and allyship and people, different movements coming together. So I decided to work for the Will, where I am since 4 months, since January of this year. So here I am.
Is it only 4 months? We say in the Wheel there is no sense of time. So I suppose you mentioned your sister, and I'm always curious as to the strongest allies usually have the most personal stories. So how has your own personal experiences impacted this journey that you are on as an ally?
I guess, so my sister has an intellectual disability and some psychosocial issues, and basically what I witnessed, she's my older sister, and she's also my I lost the word, Marin. Godmother. Thank you. Oof. Just lost. Thanks very much. I'm gonna have to rely on you from now on. And from when I was a child, her whole story is sadly a story of exclusion. From her entering in mainstream school back in the 90s, where there was no such thing as SNAs and supports. Even today, we're struggling with that, but there was no such thing. Bullied, went back to, was sent to special schools, and that was the first step in what I call the special world, where she never came out after. She's now 45. After special school, she went to special vocational training. She was to a lot of special places. Ended up, unfortunately, in psychiatric hospital for 9 years because there was no place, no services available in the community, and now has been in for 15 years in a big kind of scale institution in the middle of nowhere. They talk about inclusion, but it's, this kind of congregated setting, 50 people all together with nursing home in the middle of nowhere. So basically looking at this, 2 things that's really I got from my own story. The first one is that the public space that we all share is not available to everyone. That's the first thing. Some people are excluded, some people are invisible. We've all heard about the Grace report, the Grace case recently, and the story of abuse in foster home. That's the first thing. Not everyone gets to access this kind of space. And the second one is that as people who have a chance to be here in the shared space, we have a responsibility for the people who are not seen, for the people who are not heard, to support them to tell the stories, and when they're not able to share their own stories, to speak on their behalf, but to make sure that they are seen, they are heard. So yeah, that's really what's built my commitment to allyship.
Yeah, that's powerful. And Adele, what about yourself? You have a different background other than Montessori teaching as well, don't you?
In terms of?
In like your own experience of working with these groups and how that has like added to your commitment for allyship.
Definitely. When I was training and in the beginning of my Montessori career, I was placed in the Central Remedial Clinic. So I was in the school of the Central Remedial Clinic. And I worked with from 9 years of age to the teenagers. Yeah. So it really gave me that sense of human beings and, you know, the abilities and just the difficulties of being disabled, you know, and the disadvantage that brings, and that when you work with that individual and bring them on, it's just so fantastic. And actually one of the young teenagers that I worked with is in one of the Starbucks in Clondalkin, and so I often go to Starbucks just to see him, you know, because it's just fantastic to see that, you know, that turnaround and that change. Yeah,
and you've met a huge amount. So what's interesting, when you were talking about Mr. Price, I'm sure other people noticed you were talking about it as a startup. That's not how any of us recognise Mr. Price now. That is a full Sunday out for me. Like, that is actually get the car, bring your card.
We're only 15 years old.
But that's that's what's interesting, because when I was here in Mr. Price, DEI, I was like an overnight success, which, as we all know, that's not how it started.
No.
So you've been in this space for longer than a lot of people. So what have you found about, like, what has been your learning in that space?
The learning has been just phenomenal. Like from having, say, students with disabilities in, and me looking at them and saying, genuinely, I don't know how we're going to do this, to looking at, say, a colleague currently that we're having a book published for, a poetry book, and we're looking back on that journey when we couldn't get that young man in through the door. It took over a week to just get him past the front door. So what I've just learned is, don't limit anybody. The future is, we just don't know the future, so give everybody the chance and give everybody that equal opportunity, and that whether it's allyship or buddy system or whatever it is, but really, really believe in people and just open up the door and to say, I don't know how this is going to work. And that's okay. It's okay, because yes, we were early pioneers of it, which really upsets me, because we don't want to be recognised for this. This should be the everyday, and I don't believe we do anything above and beyond. We do what we're supposed to do. But it's just that thing of opening up and saying, we'll figure this out together.
Yes, and have there been impacts, like you've told us some of the impacts. The best one actually for our sector is the profitability. Do you want to tell them a bit about, not what you think is, but actually you have measures of this, don't you?
So what happened was we started looking at, you know, how can we integrate people with disabilities? So if there is like a task that can't be done, for instance, if somebody maybe can't use a till because numeracy is a challenge, how do we get around that? So we learned about job carving and about just that whole process of doing what you're really, really good at. So instead of wanting everybody to be able to be good at everything, which is never going to happen, let's focus on what you are really good at and what you can do right now and build on it from there. So what happened then was that we had colleagues who were really, really good on, say, our autistic colleagues were brilliant on pricing. And pricing has been the challenge in our business from the get-go. Our colleagues love merchandising. They do these incredible displays and they forget to tell how much it is, you know, or they leave the old pricing there. So what we did then was we took the amazing merchandisers thing and the amazing pricers, and we buddied them together. So now the merchandiser was like, oh, I'm never doing that job again. Like, I just don't want to do it. Sales go up, but productivity went up. We went from pricing audits in the 30%, which makes me cringe, to them being 97, 98, 99%, and in some cases 100%. So, and then everybody has their purpose, and we can grow from that. And it doesn't mean because you're great at pricing, you're always going to price, but that builds your confidence, it builds your skill. One of our colleagues said to us one time about, you know, I'm always about meaningful work experience, and I said, I don't want people being given a sweeping brush to sweep the floor. But however, that colleague challenged me on that, and he said, I know how to sweep the floor, I do it at home. If you let me to sweep the floor, it'll build up my self-esteem. and then I can move on from there.
So I think what's interesting about that is you had the conversation.
Always listening.
Yeah.
Always. That's the key to it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So how have you found any other, you've mentioned a couple to me now, but some things where you thought you were having X impact, but you actually had Y impact, like some of the surprising things that you found out over the course of your journey?
Are you getting at something specific?
No, you have great stories though. Tell them one of your stories.
I'm just trying to think about which story that you're thinking about.
Well, I'll go to Guillaume and you have a think about it. So you've obviously seen some work, you've some great stories as well of people that you worked with about those, like you mentioned the lady who started off non-verbal, and actually that confidence of being able to go to work. Yeah. So have you seen any, like we think we're doing, when we engage in DEI, if we do it at a very scientific level, we think we're achieving X, but actually we achieve something different for the person that might be the other side. You were telling us about Paul.
Yes, and actually Paul, this is Paul Alford, is actually living here in Navan, and he wrote his own book about his own story. He couldn't be here today, unfortunately, but I asked him if I could share his story, and he was happy for me to do so. So Paul was born here in Navan and spent most of his life in what we refer here in Ireland as congregated settings. He grew up in an environment where he was told what time he should wake up at, what he should eat, what kind of activities he should do. Door were closing at 9. He couldn't go for his cigarettes. After that, he was working in sheltered workshops. He was paid at rates of, let's talk about employment back in the days in sheltered workshops. He was working 20 hours per day for €2. Most of his disability allowance was taken away from him, and he used to get like 10 or 20 euros out of it. So that's where he was living. And Allyship in Action is that he was able to reach out to the anti-bullying group and Possibility Plus, which are organizations supporting people to live independently, was able to find a place where to live, was able to, some people attack the states due to the situation with sheltered workshops and the disability allowance taken away from them, got a chunk of money, got his own house, and the pride on his face when he said, I'm 52, and for the first time of my life, I have my own front door key. His pride on his face. And on the top of this, he got a job 20 years ago. He loves to say how many years, but that's so important for him when you hear his story. Got his job 20 years ago at English in Ireland. And at the beginning, as he likes to say, I was doing everything wrong. I was sending, we were getting a lot of envelope back. And, Deirdre, the CEO back in the day, say, who did that? And I say, sorry, I actually don't know how to read and how to write because I've never been taught. Because like many people in the congregated settings, especially back in the 60s and 70s, they were deemed as non-educable, So we took courses in the evenings, learned how to write, learned how to read, computer courses to improve his skills. Then he was able to do his job, but also on the top of this, got a person to support him to live in his new place because he's been for decades in congregated settings. So it takes also time to readapt or even to just adapt to the outside world, the community. So someone was here to support him with his house, bills, clean the house, go out, and now is a very well included man in the community, going to men's sheds, going to bingo every Tuesday, and going to his park run. So yeah, is definitely famous. Yeah.
And it was Paul from Parkrun.
Yeah. So that's obviously like a big story, but all the stories of people I've supported over the past decades, who basically didn't think they could achieve much because no one never had expectations for them. All the people that I've seen that were in special schools didn't even have access to basic career guidance because there was no plans for them once they turn 18. And that's a story that many families know about disabled children and the struggle. And going through universities, that's something also, that's one of the big surprises for me coming from France. This doesn't exist in France. And what I see with Trinity College Center for people with intellectual disabilities and all the higher course available for people with intellectual disabilities, there are not enough of them in Ireland But I can tell you that at the European level, in many countries, this does not exist because it doesn't seem that university is a place for. So allyship produced this kind of bringing people together, having the companies, having the likes of Adele, having the likes of organization, supporting people to build confidence, to speak up, to get into the main space I was talking about. They've been excluded for so long. Like that's the result of allyship. And the surprising impact sometimes is that you have very different groups coming together, and you know, like the exclusion of people with intellectual disabilities in congregated settings was very similar to the exclusion that we've seen from the traveler community. And you know, we've seen like loads of my work brought me to, you know, Geneva, working with women from the International Committee on Elimination Against Discrimination Against Women to talk about legal capacity, because they weren't necessarily aware of the situation of women in institutions who are deprived of the right to make decisions. So along the way, you think, oh, it's been working in intellectual disability, so it's very specific. But actually, I've worked with women, with LGBT, with migrant, with loads of different communities, because disability transcends all groups. So that's where allyship means literally everyone around the table. So that's, yeah. Otherwise.
That's so good. I'm so sorry. I was really looking forward to meeting Paul. You started similar to Guillaume, so you started with the people with disability, but you've gone way out.
Moved well out on that. And I suppose some of the stories is we asked them for testimonials recently because we're building a new programme, and one particular individual who's 2 years with us, and he told us about, and I kind of sometimes forget their stories because they're progressing and more people are moving in, but he started with us the day after his 41st birthday. I don't know why I find that hard to say. He had spent 15 years in addictions. He had spent a number of years homeless. He came through Peter McVerry. And he just wrote his testimonial just about how he never thought he would, in his height of addictions, he would ever work again, and couldn't believe the opportunity that he got. And he looks after one of the busiest sections in the shop. But what he doesn't tell us in his testimonial is that 2 years ago he couldn't read or write. His confidence level was so low that he could not make eye contact. And when I met him for the first time, I got there and he just wandered away. So you would actually think he was being rude. But I learned for the first time that there's no confidence. I thought it was low confidence or high confidence. I didn't know people could have none at all. So through the journey, we helped him outside of work to learn to read and write, and he had written his own testimonial. So it's just really, really fantastic to see it. And within that same branch then, and this is a story that I've told recently, is one of our first people to hire through Peter McVerry came to us at the age of 53. First honest job. He said it's nice to earn an honest living. And he just talked about feeling a little bit good about himself. And the team absolutely loved him, just inside and out. But he had committed a crime before he came to us. So a year and a half later, he entered himself back into prison. And I will never forget that Friday, because my heart and soul fell out of my body, and I said, that's the end of the programme for people with convictions. This is the bit that, you know, didn't want to happen, but has happened. And I mulled it all weekend, and I was so upset over him not telling me this, that I could have done a character reference, but I think he just didn't want to let us down, and you know, for his first opportunity as well. And then Monday or Tuesday the following week, I'm in his store because I had a meeting with his manager, and she says to me, what are you going to do to help? And I'm like, there's a lot I'll do, but I can't go into prison and take him out. But what had turned out from that is that they loved him so much that they weren't even thinking about the crime. They were so worried about him. And they wrote him letters, which I did get to him in prison. And now it turns out he's coming out in October and he's coming back to work. But the guys write to him every single week, and every week one of our team members goes in to visit him. And it turns out that the only people on his visiting list are Mr. Price staff. But he has talked to them about this being the first time in his life that anybody has been kind to him. And that breaks my heart, the thought of somebody in their 50s who has never, ever seen kindness before, and he just cannot get over it.
And didn't you tell me as well that his store mates are putting money on his commissary card?
Oh yeah, they put money on, and I never knew that was a thing, you know, that was the first thing. Like, they were really worried that when he went into prison, that he wouldn't have been paid on time and he wouldn't have enough money for the tuck shop in prison. And yeah, they put money on a regular basis on it, and they're just working with him to come out. And honestly, this will be his last time. In terms of his last time to commit a crime. And so it's turned into this beautiful social experiment, where that when you believe in somebody and you wrap around somebody, the crime is secondary. You know, we think about the criminal and we think about the monster, and we realise this is a human being. Yeah,
and you imagine like all his colleagues, that you know, what their perception of somebody who had exited prison from before.
But what I loved most is they wrote the letters as they speak. And I have scanned them and kept them, and we'll do something with the letters at some stage, but they're like, the epoxy damages are ridiculous since you've left. And they're talking, and the place isn't as clean, and one of them said in one of the letters, it's not about what we knew you did, it's what we didn't know you did. And he had brought prison standards into the business, which like is something I never thought was going to be a plus side of hiring people with convictions, but really, really is. And then their letters were so mundane in some ways. You know, we think about criminals and we think about these really hard people, and they're talking about film recommendations, or when you come out, I can't wait to make that stew with you. You know, it just demystifies everything.
And would you mind telling them about your new programme with, isn't it Loughlinstown House?
Yes.
This is genius.
Yeah. So we work with Loughlin House. It's an open prison in Cavan, and it's quite remote. So when the men get to open prison, after a little bit of time, they get approved to go out to work. But unfortunately, because it's very remote, they don't have that many opportunities. So I work with Spear and You and Damien Quinn, which is a fantastic organisation and a fantastic person. And Damien is telling me about some of the men. So we have a day release programme where the men will leave the prison. They can be out 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day. And they come to our local stores and they do a sales assistant role like everybody else, and then they go back. But we were trying to think about how do we get more people out, and what is our business need that could be met together. So we put in a maintenance van into the prison. So two of the men every day, 5 days a week, and there's 4 of them that rotate, come out to 5 of our stores in the area, and they power wash and they cut the grass and they paint and they keep the place gorgeous. So it met our business need, because I hate cobwebs and weeds and I can see them from outer space. And the lads have an attention to detail, and they're doing it in Loughlin House unpaid, so now they get a chance to be paid. But it's hearing their stories as well, hearing like, you know, that they just want to give money to their wives and partners. And you know, one lad that stuck in my head saying his daughter now has money to buy fake tan, and we know how important fake tan is to a teenager.
Did you not do her a discount?
Do you not know our prices?
In fairness, they couldn't get much better. I'll give you that. I'm just going to go back. So, Guillaume, I was really struck when we had our earlier conversation that you said Ireland was actually one of the better countries for its treatment of people with disabilities, because I feel like we still have a long way to come. But I suppose DEI, as we understand it at a very high level, is like, it's under attack at the moment. And you've seen it from, like, you've worked in other countries and you've seen it, like, why is this so important, and how do we stay motivated? Because it is kind of exhausting waking up every morning and seeing, you know, another attack or another right being lost. So, like, for the people in the room, what's your motivation, or what's your advice to stay motivated?
Just before I get to that, just want to make sure I'm clear on that. Like, Ireland's is good when it comes to higher education course for people with intellectual disabilities, but there are many other areas where, like, we are far from being great. Just want to make sure, because there could be, you know, but
I was getting ahead of myself there.
Take it easy. First, I guess it's like all the successful stories, like we are talking about like people who are literally thriving because of the impact of allyship, because of, you know, the result of a community being supportive. You know, I was telling you about Paul, like what I didn't share about him is that he got training from his bank branch, like to just do online banking, so he can do his own financing himself, and like he got also supports. He got a doctor like who is really aware of how to communicate in easy format, easy to read, easy to understand information about his health. So like all the kind of supportive community create this kind of successful story. So I guess what motivates us is the fact that it's still not the case for so many of them. We still have more than 2,000 people in Ireland living in congregated settings. We still have many graces out there. And I guess that's as long as not everyone is able to share the same space, that's something like, that have to keep motivating us. I guess what is important as well is like, and something that I hear a lot as part of the will when we go to Cork, when we go to Galway, is like people are talking about the lack of shared space. And when you have more shared space, when people can talk about how they overcame barriers, obstacles from the system, and they shared how they could bring to each other. In Galway, like we had 2 mornings facilitated dialogue on social cohesion, and the first day was full of frustration because people were sharing about their current experience in Ireland. So obviously the lack of funding, and then like the overload of compliance and the cost and all the barriers were. So there was a lot of anger and there was a lot of frustration. And the second day was focusing on how practically, forget about the officials, forget about the politicians, what can we do as a community? And then like that's where like people looked at practical solution. I have this World Coffee, I have a venue available for this new organization. If you need a venue, I'm here. I can support you. Like I have staff available who can support you with these events. And someone from a migrant group said like, I sent an email a couple of months ago to invite all the community to the event, and barely anyone showed up. And when you don't have shared space, you don't necessarily see this kind of thing. So it's important that we have in the local place, shared space where everyone comes together, not just disability, not just one group, but everyone together. And I guess being together is also what motivates us to do better and to support as allies other groups.
There's a lot of work to do.
Yeah.
Enough. I think I may possibly be barred from the social welfare in Tala. My picture may be up. Like we have a gentleman works for us in our Tala store, and he's an older gentleman, and I don't know where he'd be without his job. He absolutely loves his job. But we were at something together, and the sole was falling off his shoe. So I was like, something's going on here. Sent the guys to get him new shoes because that was the first point that had to be done. And then sat down with him a few days later when I seen him, and I said, is everything okay? And it turned out that he had been on job seekers when he should have been on disability payment. And he works with us 2.5 days a week. And that's, that is his limit. It's not that we won't give him more, but that is his ceiling. And he had been taken off job seekers because he couldn't fill out an online form. Now, if he told us he needed that online form, we would have done it for him, but he just didn't come to us about it. So he was going to bed early every day, so he didn't have to turn on the light in the heat. And he just was living on like 2.5 mornings or whatever it is he does with us. So I got into the social welfare and really had to shout and scream. And then you'd fill out the forms and you'd bring him back the next day because he couldn't advocate for himself. And they go, oh, they're the wrong forms. And this went on like that. I literally lost the head. And I did a sit-in in the office.
I've no doubt, but go on.
But anyway, we got him on disability, we got him a medical card, we got him travel bus pass, and there's still a few bits that we're fighting for him for at the moment. So like, it's not good enough. It's not good enough that services will send out an email to somebody that has an intellectual disability and expect them to do that and not say, well, how do we help you along the way? So if I end up in prison,
I'll come get you.
my friends in there.
I'll put money on your card.
I'll give you money on your card.
Yeah, we will. And how do you stay motivated other than the internal rage against the social welfare system? But like I suppose you've mentioned you're not just like looking down, you're looking up as well. You're trying to make changes at a different level as well. Yeah.
So I just get motivated by seeing what's possible, seeing the opportunities that we're given, and then saying, but what else is out there? Who else is there that could do a help? And then just saying, okay, but what else is possible, and what next can we do? And we just get braver all the time. You know, recently a colleague joined us, and she's profoundly deaf, and the only language she speaks is Ukrainian. And it's like, no problem. Let's figure this out. So she's in work. We have somebody who speaks Russian, and so does she. And we're looking at assistive technologies for her. So it's just that really motivates you. And then you see the success. And you say, okay, let's go to the next thing. But really for me at the moment is really trying to deal with that social welfare thing and deal with the policy changes and not let it go. So unfortunately for them, I sit in the labour market subgroup, so they hear from me.
And that is actually a big issue for DEI, because I know I've spoken to young activists who are like, if I get a job, I lose all my social welfare. And there's no soft landing. It takes years to get onto it, and then it's just boom when you're off. We're coming up to time, so it is obviously the Leadership Academy, and of which the whole point of these events is there is no point, so you do cross, that's the idea, that you would meet other people from other parts of the sector. If you were to say to, like, speaking to leaders at different levels, and what is our duty as leaders to allyship? What are the things that we need to do, that we need to keep front and foremost in our mind as we take our own leadership journeys?
I'll start, like, our pipeline is really, really important, and we need a pipeline of young individuals coming through, but we need diverse voices. So we need to speak to people from the travelling community, with lived experience is just phenomenal, and it blows me away, the leadership and the creativity that comes from it. So when we're thinking about our pipeline, think about everybody, think about race, think about gender, think about literally having every voice at the table, and then sponsor individuals and to say, I am going to come on your journey with you, whether you want me on it or not. But we're going to be here, and we're going to lead by example and to show how it's done. And we want to see people at government level, like when we look at the moment, and I sat in front of a minister yesterday and was very, very disappointed, and saying that's not good enough, you know, for somebody who just wasn't really interested in what we had to say. But we need everybody at that table, so we shouldn't be looking at our ministers mostly male. And mostly at an age category, and mostly white, and very little representation across the board.
Never had to try and draw down a social welfare
and have absolutely no idea what the barriers are, and aren't listening to us when we talk. Not in every case. There are some fantastic ministers that I really have hope for, but we have to have everybody around the table at every level.
I guess that's exactly as you said. It's really making sure that as allies we can make sure that around all the tables where decisions are made, we bring people with lived experience, because the whole nature of a conversation completely change when you only have technicians talking about numbers, stats. We don't have the budget. Someone going around the tables, sharing their story. I've never seen any politician saying, well, the budget at the moment is, no, just going to hear the story, and they're going to be impacted from one way or another. So we have, as allies, to find a way people can share the stories around the table, but also as allies, knowing when it is our time just to leave, when the person has been supported to advocate, has all the skills, doesn't need any support, and basically just to withdraw, so like they can really like take ownership of their life, of their future. So I think that's really important.
I think that's really interesting, that we have the flexibility and that we like use our words to engage with people, to say, when do you need me to step in, because I will use my privilege to support that, but also when do you need me to step out because you're an autonomous human being and this is where I wanted you to be. So
if I could just add to that, like that DEI isn't about one side helping another. It's about us working together to make something fairer and something stronger. You know, that we stand shoulder to shoulder and to say we're equal and this is what we're doing.
That's a great note to finish on. It doesn't fly. That's it. Well, big round of applause. Thank you to both of them. I love you guys. I feel like I should give you a standing ovation.